My name's Anthony Brown, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Breaker. So my brother, Amir, he was a promoter for like 10 years all across the country. I mean, Super Bowl, Ad Week, All-Star Weekend, it didn't matter. Him and his best friends were throwing the best parties. And the biggest thing that kept coming up throughout that time period was that labels and independent artists would try to find them as promoters to actually try to get their song promoted in the club. Venmo and Cash App became our escrow system. Search and discovery became our phone book. The reality is that we really needed some technology in the middle to clean up the payments, to clean up the verification, and just to make sure a lot of the clunkiness went away. So how would you reach out to DJs and influencers? Emails, comments, spamming them with DM messages. And the reality is that there was a lot more nuance in terms of getting a song into a set. And so we built Breaker. Really, the first version of it was really to solve that problem between connecting artists and influencers with DJs and labels to get songs played in the club. Then the pandemic hit, and we went through the stages of grief around that. We had the brilliant go-to-market strategy of doing it in all of our parties for the year. Mother Nature had something else in mind for that. But it really opened up a massive opportunity because we started to see that, TikTok had become like a real serious breeding ground for new sounds. Instagram Reels became a new breeding ground for sounds. And we started to realize that the same constraints that existed actually offline really actually existed online as well. And so that's where Breaker came from. My personal background, 10 years on Wall Street, split between Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Breaker's a two-sided marketplace that connects influencers, DJs, and we view influencers as a variety of things. That could be the chef, that could be a comedian, a dancer, a DJ. It doesn't matter. If you have digital real estate, we define you as an influencer on Breaker. And we believe that your real estate is very valuable to pushing sounds. And at the other side of the market, we have a ton of independent artists, 40,000 to be exact, and 10% of those are actually labels. So we work with record labels, independent artists, and now including brands to be able to connect organically to influencers in a very nuanced way. So we take into account your musical preferences if you're a brand or an artist. We take into account your musical preferences if you're a label. And the matching criteria and the things that happen inside of the platform are all driven based on musical taste. And we believe that that nuance is actually something that's missing from influencer marketing. So a catchphrase that we have is, music drives content and content drives commerce. And Breaker really sits at the intersection of all of that, pulling it all together in pretty automated, seamless ways. Payments get streamlined, search and discovery gets streamlined, and analytics, more importantly, gets streamlined all in one closed system instead of it being antiquated by email. Breaker has a very simple premise. And that premise is that, democratization means so many different things to so many different people. So when you start to think about artists, what is democratization to them? It's having new avenues of finding new audiences in ways that you never had before at the click of a button. When you are an artist and you're going into the DMs of influencers, they don't know who you are. They don't know if you're going to be a woman or a man of your word in terms of paying them after they do the service. They don't even know if they like your music. Breaker has built a one-stop shop where you can literally go in front of 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, million people, right? At the click of a button at a very affordable price. To me, that's democratization. When you start to think about just influencers in general, it's very difficult as an influencer. One, usually people are coming to you with specific offers in terms of what they believe that you're worth. At Breaker, we invert that. We say that you determine what your worth is. So you create profiles, you create campaigns, you create opportunities, and you don't accept anything at Breaker unless you believe that it's on par and on value with what you're worth. That is full stop important at Breaker. And I think the last thing that we view democratization is finding alternative paths to create pathways for artists. So for instance, we partnered with Rolling Loud Music Festival and the financial technology company Ahead Money. We chose one lucky kid to go on stage and we ran a massive competition. And it was democratization because the brand was able to associate with all these independent artists that were looking to get on stage. They had 10,000 downloads. Rolling Loud loved it because they generated 10 million impressions for a festival that was already going to go, but actually really more lighter fluid based on these artists trying to say, hey, Rolling Loud in their local nodes. And then the influencers that we paid to amplify that campaign also benefited. So Breaker believes that there is an intersection between brands, influencers, and artists that hasn't really been pulled together in a culture-forward way. And I believe at scale, Breaker would be the Google AdWords of influencers. And you'll be able to find anyone that you want at the click of a button in the audience that you want and both sides will feel that there's something there for everybody in pretty seamless ways. So that's Breaker. And if that's anything that resonates with you, you can hit us up at musicbreaker.com with no E at the end. In the beginning of Breaker, we did like a massive email experiment where we reached out to a lot of people, and we wound up acquiring like 10,000 people for our waiting list. It was 60% artists and 40% influencers. And, you know, they just were fascinated by this concept of influencers and artists sitting under the same roof. So we got a lot of inbound. Now, before we launched the product, we're like, man, we're gonna need to work with one kid and really take him to the moon. That kid for us was Charlie on a Friday. Charlie on a Friday is an 18-year-old, well, 17-year-old at the time, senior in high school in the Seattle area. And he just had that thing. You know, it was almost like Kid Laroi met Justin Bieber, met Post Malone, wrapped in culture, but presenting as an all-American, like, you know, 17-year-old kid that was the star of the football team. And just immediately we fell in love with Charlie and who he was. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of resources at the time, but we leaned in heavily. And, you know, he had 5,000 streams at the time, maybe 10,000 max, 300 followers on Instagram, 2,000 followers on TikTok, and literally just like a year of persistence and him staying in the studio, doing the work, keeping his head down, and us really trying to explore new digital channels to help him doing that for himself. It just became this like centrifuge of just energy and inertia. And like you look up now, you know, all the majors are reaching out to him. This kid's work ethic is just elite. And I think that it's a perfect example of like, sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. And Charlie was that for us. And it is an honor, truly, to be working with him. He's now at 100,000 streams a month in terms of monthly listeners. That's a 20-30x, you know what I mean, in terms of where he was. And in my mind, that's just the beginning. You know, there are millions of Charlie all across America. And ultimately, like, Breaker's not a label, right? And so there becomes a point where kids need professional infrastructure to take them to that next level. But Breaker exists really in that no man's land where there's just diamonds in the rough like Charlie. And we believe that our platform is designed to help that kid break through the noise, no pun intended. Influencers, they come in so many different shapes or forms. You know, we have hair care stylists that literally use the platform to show their business off and put music behind it. We have DJs that come on and do live listening sessions. I'm talking about legendary. I'm talking about DJ Scream, DJ EFX, like really high profile DJs that literally create unique links. They send it out to their 200,000, 300,000 followers. They gather a ton of submissions, and they actually charge per song. And because the platform organizes the submissions as a smart inbox, they're actually able to really put real points on the board in terms of how they price their time and their audience reach. That's never been done before in terms of organization of music listening. And so in my mind, you know, influencers have come onto the platform and we've put thousands, literally specifically since inception, I'll give you the number. We've put $350,000 into influencers' hands off of our MVP. Not even built on a true tech stack yet. It was built on a low code, no code solution. So it was that cultural scrappiness about Breaker that existed in our DNA. Now that we have $4.2 million, we built out a real tech team. You know, we started to onboard major labels, but these influencers continue to benefit. And what I've noticed is that there's actually a network effect in our business. The more demand we're able to get from labels, brands, independent artists, et cetera, the more the influencers actually love the platform, and we're able to acquire agencies. We're able to acquire absolutely independent do-it-yourself influencers. And I think that as Breaker continues to be a scaling company, I actually do believe that we're going to be a really economic development company in many ways, because sometimes you have influencers with millions of followers that aren't getting, you know, GlaxoSmithKline or Procter & Gamble or these major Pepsi knocking on the door with massive checks. But music and their audience is very valuable. And Breaker continuously helps those types of influencers that, you know, they don't have a manager even sometimes really get real capital. And I believe that, you know, as long as we can develop tools for the ones that are professionally managed, you know, because they come on the platform and find value as well, but also keeping in mind that do-it-yourself influencer, I think that's where you start to see scale and, like, really, quite frankly, see us impacting the quality of the distribution of funds in that industry holistically.